Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Some people say we fool, some people say we go to school. Some people still asking what to do it for the youth. The government breaking so the youth is still checking. No entertainment, so we're making no money. I'm telling this to y'all, I ain't having no job. That's what I stand for. I'm fighting for. Everybody pop balling, but my pocket ball. Now everybody fucking shot, but why I can't fall? The whole cover hold, now the whole hustle. Tell me, you owe me one bottle. Now everybody for the sale, only go for all. I hope it's go for you're the one divine. Go for all in the whole music game. Let me tell you what it is. You think the common people still don't know how to do it when land. Because the other common man get common sense. I'm a common sense. Let me to be intelligent. I understand all that baby thing. All you relevant, I get no content. No one you as a president, too much TV talk. I'm resort to negligence and dependent to build it from the no development. So the measurement to the money to echo band, bidding all up on the hands, putting our resources, but they put it back to get never see no profit. Now we need a profit. We come and take up from poverty, the prosperity for people buying every day. Big masters, everybody falling, not back and forth. And never stop, not let go. We won't never go slow. Papa coming home, can trust.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our fourth in a series of Liberian history. Tonight, we are going to discuss modern Liberia. That's the period from early 1920s to the 1980s. Our guest tonight is Dr.Nya Kwiawon Taryor. Dr. Taryor, welcome to Focus on Liberia.
Thank you very much. I'm happy.
All right. Now, we are on YouTube tonight, and so please join us on YouTube, and we're going to have a live show. Keep tuned.
You gotta double up. Sometimes you're way. When my boss out of ball, out the ball, you make more LIB, they wanna know what's up. What's up? They wanna know what's up. Working life so hard. It seems a little nigga gotta hustle just to keep on a job. And they see it's only politics, but it's just the politics. Niggas all about getting the dollar shit. This is for my hood niggas in the G hustle. And for all my single mothers struggling and suffering. No more election, niggas do a selection. That's why them niggas always using a deadly weapon. And to all my youth, them better keep your head up. Wake up in the morning, make your bed, get your break up. Even the leadership, there's some DRIC. But Holy Charles Hitler in the AICC. Even the leadership, there's some DRIC. But Holy Charles Hitler in the AICC. Everybody got party time, and get raw. I don't want my soul. I'm who you get my soul. Everybody pop party, my pocket ball. So I said, nigga, eat Seahawks. I said, G-O, when y'all will watch that blow my floor. We'll be people that talk deal. Oh, like war. So I'm telling that boy. I'm telling you who I get my soul. GHD pop party.
Once again, I want to say welcome to Focus on Liberia. Our topic tonight is Liberian history. We are focusing on Liberian history, specifically the period from 1920 to 1980. Again, our guest is Dr.Nya Kwiawon Taryor. By way of a brief introduction, Dr. Taryor is a preacher, a professor. He taught in colleges and universities, seminaries in Liberia and also in the United States. He's a father of 3 children. He's retired now, but he's still working. He's writing and publishing books for Liberian authors and other authors from around the world. He holds degrees in economics, education, theology and ethics, social and biblical ethics, that is. He's the former National Youth Coordinator for the United Methodist Church in Liberia, Professor Emeritus of Dr.Nya University College, and President Emeritus of Banga School of Theology. He's the author of many books. He's been Dean and Lecturer of many seminaries of universities and colleges. He is one of the activists of the 1970s, and others term him as one of the promoters of the liberation theology in Liberia. He also served as former Vice President for the Movement of Justice in Africa, MOJA. And we are glad to have you, Dr. Taryor, on Focus on Liberia.
Thank you very much, Dennis. I'm exceedingly happy to be a part of your program this evening. And I'm delighted to share some information with you about modern Liberia, especially from 1920 to 1980. But we have so much information here. I'm not sure if this time is sufficient, 1 hour, to tell a story of a nation within 60 years, but only 1 hour. That would be difficult, but we'll try to do the best we can. This period in our Liberian history was marked by a lot of changes. There's very many changes. Action, field of events, time with all kinds of improvement, new development, new innovation, technology, technological innovation, new experiences, new growth. This was a major time in Liberia. Sometimes it was a time of growth. Some people term it growth without development, and others say it was growth with development. And most scholars of Liberian history tell us that these were the most eventful and maybe the most productive years of Liberia's modern history. And this period is not only the period of Liberia industrial revolution, so to speak, it can be considered as our Renaissance period and our period of enlightenment and awareness, growing, and a period of political maturity, if you will, technological and collective social and cultural consciousness developed during this period, because I know we worked with our members, with our citizens in Liberia when I was there in the 70s, and I know what we accomplished.
Right. And Dr. Taryor, not to stop you, that's why it's important for us to have you for this period, because you did not only watch history, you also made history as a key player in the in activism. So if we can start on this footing, we have 60 years to cover. But if you can subdivide those years to just give us a guideline as to how we can proceed tonight. If you can give us some breakdown.
Okay. During the 60 years, there were 5 presidents that led Liberia. They each had their own tenure, time to serve, and they had different times that they served. Charles D.B. King, Charles Dunbar Burgess King, he served from 1920 to 1930. And Edwin Barclay served from 1930 to 1944. and William V.S. Tubman served from 1944 to 1971, and William R. Torbert from 1971 to 1980, and of course, Samuel K. Doe from 1980 to 1990. So in light of this reality, we have divided our discussion into actually 4 segments. The time from 1920 to 1930 is 1 segment. And from 1930 to 1944 is another segment. The 3rd segment is 1944 to 1971. And the last one will be 1971 to 1980. As far as the Doe's regime, I will let another historian or another scholar deal with that, because we don't have sufficient time to cover.
Right. We have that cover. We have that cover in our post-coup Liberia. Next week, Dr. Sam Gobo is going to cover that. But it's easy to look back on those 60 years and call them the good old days. You are going to cover 5 presidents. You know, we look back most of the time and say, oh, we wait for, you know, normal days like all the good old days. When you look back at those 60 years, give us a few sentences to describe them.
Well, those 50 years were years, the 60 years were years of great achievement. They were years that Liberia was going through difficulties in terms of internal and external struggle to bring our people together into a unified nation. It was a time of abject poverty when Liberia actually had nothing in terms of capital investment. And that was, the 60 years can be considered a time of breath, a time of growth. So along with growth, there came growing pains. And each of these leaders, Charles D.B. King or Edwin Barclay or William V.S. Tubman, they had their own areas of success, and they also had their own areas of challenges. For Charles D.B. King, he identified with the people as a nationalist leader, and he tried to break the barriers between the settlers and the indigenous people. And he also wanted national unity and truly unify our country. And he brought the indigenous people into national politics and appointed indigenous chiefs into major positions of power in the different regions. He established, in fact, he was the first to establish the open door policy, whereby foreign investors were able to come into Liberia to invest into our country. He brought Firestone in 1926 and also permitted Dr. and Mrs. George Way Alley, who built Ganta Mission, to be established in 1926. So this was a period of growth. The open door policy that he established was supposed to be continued by succeeding generations of leaders like Edwin Barclay, William V.S. Tubman, and even Talbot himself embraced the open door policy, and many foreigners were able to come in to invest in our country. Those were times when we didn't have medication, we did not have hospitals, we did not have clinics, the roads were not built, educational institutions were very few and far in between. It was a time of difficulties, but these men did the best they could to unify our country. It was not all good. There was some bad stuff too, along with the leadership of Charles D.B. King. Under his administration, forced labor took roots in Liberia when indigenous people were forced to go to Fanatipo to work on the plantations there for no pay at all. And whatever they paid, which was $45 per head, persons going there, the money went into the pockets of the government officials in Monrovia. This is why the League of Nations came in and set up the Christie Commission to investigate the problem. And it was the reason why Charles D.B. King and his vice president, Allen Yancey, resigned from office.
All right. So that's a brief description of that period that we refer to in our discussion as modern Liberia. So right. I want to give you.
But that's not all there is to it. Barclay came in with his own idiosyncrasies. He came in with his own ambition, his own dreams and aspirations, and certain things he did, certain things he didn't do. If you want to deal with that later, we can.
Right. I want to give you the chance just to start the way you have broken down these 60 years into 5 periods, just to go on, give you ample time to describe each of those periods for our listening audience. Okay. Again, if you are just joining us, this is focused on Liberia. We are discussing modern Liberia. That's the period from 1920 to 1980. Our guest tonight is Dr.Nya Kwiawon Taryor. Dr. Taryor, go ahead, briefly describe for us each of those periods, cover whatever there is within a short period of time.
Okay. For Edwin Barclay actually was the Secretary of State. He was not in line to be president, but remember the president resigned, that is, Charles D.B. King resigned, and his vice president, who should have taken over, Allen Yancey, also resigned. And the other to become president, well, there were some arguments and some issues that rose during that period, and it decided that the Secretary of State, Edwin Barclay, should take the helm of leadership. So he took the helm of leadership, and as Nya Boma, one of the Liberian historians, he written a very beautiful book here, and I'd like to recommend this book to everybody. He details all our presidents, but in it he refers to Barclay as the transformative and centralist leader. Barclay helped to transform the Liberian economy, the ethnic relationship. He brought in social harmony and national pride. He was not an extremist. He tried to take middle ground. He defended Liberian sovereignty and independence from foreign powers that were trying to take over and colonize Liberia. In fact, after Edwin Barclay took over in 1930, first he completed Charles D.B. King's term, and then in 1931, he was elected to serve his own term. When he took his own term, some of the American Liberians who were leaders at some levels did not want Liberians to take over their own country. In fact, they wanted foreigners to come and take Liberia and keep it under what the term is trusteeship. Like the British came and took Sierra Leone, they took Nigeria, the French came and took the Ivory Coast, and they took Guinea. So they wanted the Americans to come and take Liberia. But Edwin Barclay said, not even over my grave. If they want to take Liberia, it will have to be by force. We will have to lead our own people and determine our own destiny. No country is coming to take over. The British were interested in taking over Liberia. The French were interested in taking over Liberia, but Edwin Barclay would not allow them to do that. He stabilized the Liberian economy and currency. Before he took over, the currency we used in Liberia was the British shilling and pounds. But he was linked with the Liberian dollars and preferred that we use Liberian dollars. This is when we started using the Liberian dollars, and he tried to equalize some of the economic difficulties we were experiencing. Not only that, there was a Kru rebellion. The people at in the Kru Coast area were rebelling because they heard that Liberia had no more national leader, and that the chiefs were trying to gain prominence. They were trying to be leaders in their own area and to sell some of their fellow Africans. But because the League of Nations had said that Liberia should never be engaged in forced labor or slavery, the Frontier Force was organized by Edwin Barclay, and he sent them down to the Kru Coast, down to Nana Kru, Barclayville, from Kepamus, all the area. And then, of course, the issue was stabilized. Barclay provided the fulcrum for our triple heritage. And the triple heritage, I will consider them to be the indigenous, the settlers, and our American connection. Those are the Liberian three staple triple heritage that we credit Barclay for helping to protect. At the break of the war, that is World War II, he chose to remain with America, and he drove the Germans that were in Liberia, he drove them out of the country. So he chose the right side during the war. And Liberians were extremely happy because at this time, their connection with the United States was thicker. America came and built rubber fields, and that helped the Allies to come and refill their planes and go on with their war activities. Liberia was in close connection with the United States. In fact, at some point, Roosevelt visited Liberia early in our history. And finally, excuse me, and finally, Barclay was responsible to oppose the Port of Entry Act, which was passed in 1864, which indicated that no foreigner should come to Liberia and open business there. He was opposed to it, and he said, it is not right, because if you do this, what's going to happen is that we will never develop our country. We need foreigners to come and invest in our country, and through that investment, we'll be able to have money to come in to build our institutions, our hospitals, our clinics, and so forth. It was C. Barclay that wrote the Lone Star Forever. He built up the Frontier Force, and he also rebuilt, or not rebuilt, but he built the FFU that we call Robertsport, where the planes come and land. And of course, there were some railroad connection that he built from Beaumont so that the iron ore at that time can be shipped to the destination. But unfortunately for us in Liberia, even though Firestone came in 1926, and we have even mined our own mountains, the problems we had with Firestone was that Firestone took Liberia, the agreement that was made, which was to give 99 years to Firestone to operate. Firestone, the rubber was paid 1 cent per pound, and the Firestone company promised to employ 350,000 people to work on the farms. Guess how much land Liberia gave to Firestone? Almost a fourth of Liberia to plant rubber. That is interesting. And they were supposed to live, to work in Liberia for 99 years. That was the term of the contract. And what was happening was that because of the financial difficulties, we borrowed money from international community, from Firestone and other places, from Great Britain, $5 million.
And this was under Charles D.B. King when the money was borrowed.
Yeah, this was under Charles D.B. King. This was under Charles D.B. King. But the arrangement was also made with Daniel Howard before Charles D.B. King. And the arrangement that Daniel Howard made was to borrow $5 million from the United States to pay back Great Britain. But the issue was brought to the United States House of Senate and the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives approved the $5 million loan that Liberia wanted, but the Senate did not approve it. So therefore that loan was denied. But the other factor of it is that there was another nationalist by the name of Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey was very much interested in Liberia and wanted to come and use Liberia as a laboratory to bring Black people from around the world to settle here in Liberia. So he made arrangement with the Liberian government. But unfortunately, the United States did not want Marcus Garvey involved in Liberian affairs. And said, the Liberian government should not get any loan from Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey was willing to give $350 million to Liberia and take the whole area that was supposed to get to have him to use as his laboratory. But guess what? That portion of land that was supposed to be given to Marcus Garvey was given to Firestone. Liberia has a very, very interesting history. Very interesting history. Now, how was that money paid?
Before we go there, where was Garvey getting that money from?
Marcus Garvey was campaigning all over the United States and all over the world. Remember now, Marcus Garvey was from Jamaica.
Yeah.
He was a radical. He was a very progressive person who wanted to change. The Pan-Africanist thrust that he had was to bring as many Black people from around the world to Liberia. So he organized this universal national Negro, they call it Negro Association. But I think they call it UNIA. Barclay was a member, and then some of the Liberian leaders were members, but Charles D.B. King was not a member of it. There were some Liberians who opposed Garvey, and there were some Liberians who supported Garvey in the effort. But America wanted to show to Liberia that they were not interested in Garvey's movement. So therefore, they encouraged Du Bois to represent America during the inauguration of, I think it was the second inauguration of Barclay. So William E.B. Du Bois came to represent America at this occasion instead of Garvey. And the point was to show to Garvey that America did not see him as the champion of the Black people in America. Very unfortunate.
Oh, wow. So now this loan, and we'll come to a Firestone mode, but I want you to just untangle that about the loan that was not paid. So how did Firestone come in the picture as a repayment of that loan?
Well, in America at that time, in the 20s and the 30s, early, there were boogies. I don't know if you heard of boogies. Boogies were little cars then, and there were wagons. And those wagons and boogies needed tires. And America was really interested in this new innovation of transportation, cars, boogies, and cars. Ford was involved, and Firestone was responsible. At least it took itself. Harvey Firestone decided that he was going to produce enough rubber around the world to be able to supply all the tires that cars needed in America. So America wanted to subsidize this project. So they gave $350,000 to Marcus, not Marcus, they gave it to Firestone to look for new alternatives. Then Firestone gave that amount, the $5 million to Liberia as a loan. And Firestone wanted the money back after some time. But Firestone had no way to enforce or require payment. So they told Barclay, you have to pay our loan. Liberia has to pay our loan. And Barclay said, well, we don't have the money. Give us time. Let us borrow money from some source and pay you back. And in the meantime, Great Britain and Europe were after Liberia to pay the loan that they have already gotten from them. And Liberia was in a distress. Poverty, abject poverty. No streets. Only two streets were in Monrovia in 26, 27, 28. Broad Street and Ashland Street. And those streets were not even paved. There were not lights all over the place. The schools were not, many schools were not in existence. Electricity was not like they have now, and the roads were not built. All over the country, the government had not taken the initiative to build all roads all over the country because of the financial difficulties. Liberia did not have money. Liberia was looking for loan or help, and they couldn't even pay the loan it had borrowed from other nations. So then what happened was that Barclay said, well, give us forbearance, meaning give us enough time, let's pay. But Firestone did not want to do this, but they had no way to force Liberia to pay the money. No way to pay Liberia, to make Liberia to pay the money. So then gradually the legislature met and decided that before Liberia gets any loan, they must pay Firestone. You know, this is how eventually Firestone was paid.
Firestone was paid by giving them, signing that agreement, is that what you mean?
Yeah, they eventually paid whatever loan they have borrowed from Firestone. Remember now, Firestone promised to employ 350,000 Liberians to work. And that also was a problem. The problem that brought was that Liberians themselves, the government officials were planting rubber trees in their own places that they have bought because they saw that the cash product, rubber, was going to make money for them, even though the price of rubber was so low, but they too wanted people on their farms. So then Firestone could not raise the price of how much it was paying the workers, because if they did, it meant that people would rather go work for Firestone instead of the officials who had their own rubber farms. Yeah. Are you following?
Yep.
So therefore, plantation workers were not paid sufficient money to make a decent living. Some of their living conditions were horrible, even in the 50s and 60s in Firestone.
No, something before we get there, something I want to get clear, because the coming of Firestone to Liberia was first because of a loan that Liberia borrowed from Great Britain.
Yeah, Liberia was looking for money all over the place. Liberia was looking for money all over the place. But Firestone was also looking for a place where they can get cheap labor.
Right.
And Liberia was going to provide cheap labor for Firestone. And not only that, Liberia was going to give most of its land, 4% of its land to Firestone. And that land was going to be used for crops. But one of in the agreement stated that whatever was on the land that Firestone was leasing for 99 years, whether diamond, whether gold, whether copper, whether uranium, whether bauxite in the ground, everything belonged to Firestone.
And Liberia could not negotiate those terms? Was it gone to their head, or what was the reason for which they had to accept all those conditions? 6 cents to 8.
There's a statement, Liberian statement, that when monkey is jammed, he eats pepper.
Okay. Liberia
needed the money, and the only way they could accommodate Firestone was to give this this deal, which was not even satisfactory to them. And unfortunately, till now, Liberia had not been able to build the refining place in Liberia where the rubber can be refined to make slippers and shoes and gloves and other things, tires. We sent everything to America, to Akron, Ohio, where the Firestone Company is. Akron, Ohio. And with the iron ore situation, which we will talk about later, Bethlehem Steel Corporation, along with Swedish company, exploited the mine and took everything they could take and sent them out of the country to be refined. A terrible situation. We plant potatoes and tomatoes and send them to other countries for them to put them in the can, and then we buy them from them. What a sad situation.
Right. So that was the period of Charles D.B. King and Barclay. Briefly, go over the rest of the periods in those 60 years.
Well, William Tubman comes into power. Actually, he comes into power in 1944. He comes into power. It wasn't that easy, but he managed it. When he came into power, it was not easy. However, when he took power, he was from the True Whig Party. From the True Whig Party. And he did a lot of things. What we appreciate, in fact, I refer to him as well, you can call him a benevolent dictator, if you will. He was a benevolent dictator, meaning he was a dictator, but he was doing a lot of things in the interest of Liberia. First, he was known as a national unification policy and open door policy supporter. He made sure that the government extended its hands to people in rural towns and villages, and that those who were not considered Liberians, meaning the indigenous people, were brought into the forefront of the government so that they can participate. And during those days, the people who were elected in the House of Representatives were not really people to go there and argue things out. They were considered referees. I use the term referees. Now, these referees, like Oldman, Dan Bowen, Omen, Voka, those people were considered people in the House of Representatives, but earlier they didn't vote. They didn't vote. But they were there because their presence was necessary. Eventually, they had a voting right. Suffrages were given to people and they had a voting right. In fact, the indigenous people did not become citizens until 1944 when Tubman took over. So there had been a progressive movement to that point. But when Tubman took over, he was very strong at the issue dealing with the American-Liberians connection, as well as the integration and amalgamation of indigenous people into the government. So he took trips in the different counties. There were like 5 counties and 3 provinces. And the 3 provinces, Western Province, Central Province, and Eastern Province. And the Sano County, Grand Bassa County, Macerado County, there were 5 counties. Yeah, but the representatives came from the provinces. They did not have senators from the provinces. They only had the representatives. But the counties had senators and representatives. Okay. Eventually, Tubman was to add new counties to the counties they already had. The Bone County was added, Nimba County was added, Lofa County was added, new counties were added, Grand Gita was added, and that's the progression. And eventually, schools were built around the country. And because of the open door policy, during Kennedy's time in the 60s, Tubman was able to bring the Peace Corps into Liberia. And the Peace Corps was extremely helpful because they had people coming from America, some of them doctors, some of them nurses, some of them teachers, carpenters, mechanics, and they were able to help in the rural areas. But
before you move on, you mentioned something about indigenous Liberians not being citizens until 1944. We have 5 counties, and those counties have indigenous people. How come they were not citizens?
Well, that's what I'm saying. They were referees. They came in as referees. They didn't have votes. You couldn't vote. Say, for example, I'm not a citizen of the United States, but I have a green card.
Right.
I can get a scholarship. I can get a loan. I can build a house. I can I can go to school. I can do a lot of things, but I don't vote. So there were certain rights and privileges for citizens, and those who were not citizens, certain things were denied them.
So you're saying from Joseph Jenkins Roberts all the way to Tubman, there were elections, and in those elections, the indigenous Liberians did not vote.
Sometimes there were elections, other times the election was fraudulent, very fraudulent. For example, the election of 1927.
Yeah.
Are you there?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The election in which the people that were supposed to actually vote, the number of people who were supposed to vote was far less than the number of people that voted. And we are told that monkeys and other things were carried to the poll to vote, which is very unfortunate, very unfortunate. because in that situation, the number of people who were supposed to vote were not only counted, but extra other people were brought in to vote.
Well,
I want to get myself clear.
Yeah.
Okay. President Charles D.B. King was the True Whig Party representative incumbent, and Thomas Faulkner of the People's Party was the other person voting. But what happened? They had 15,000 people who were registered to vote, citizens to vote. But at that voting, the number of persons that voted for Charles D.B. King were 240,000 citizens who voted. But 240,000 citizens were not registered to vote. Only 15,000 were registered to vote. Where did those people come from? Hello?
Wow.
So the Guinness Book of Records recorded that that was one of the most fraudulent votes ever in the history of the world.
Okay. So briefly go over the last era, which is the Turbo time.
Okay, the Turbo time. Turbo came in with a lot of speed. Now, Tubman had died in the hospital in England. And his body is still there. And the people hustled over the place to see who's going to be the president. And Talbot he's the vice president. So therefore, he's looked for all over the place and contacted and told that he was going to be president. When he comes into position, he sees himself between a rock and a hard place. What am I talking about? Well, earlier, Liberia under Tubman was under high restriction. I mean, dictatorship, voices were not heard. Tubman was harsh with his enemies. Those who felt that they were were opposing him, he considered them enemies, and he dealt harshly with them. When I was a student at Cottonton, he would set CIDs and would remove the doors that students have written all kinds of stuff, remove them and carry them to Monrovia. And people will have, they'll say, oh, let's re-elect Tubman. He was re-elected over and over and over. But now when Tubman took over, the people's eyes have started to be opened. And there had been proliferation of independence all over the world, especially in Africa in the 60s. A lot of the countries in Africa were gaining independence. And the African nations and other nations decided they were not going to be part of this Cold War. They will not be connected with the East or connected with the West. So a new political bloc, non-alliance was formed. And Talbot became a member of this non-alliance policy organization. And at the same time, he was the president of the Baptist Alliance. And the Moja group, the Susu group, the PAL group in Liberia, forming, developing consciousness of our people, telling them their rights, what's right, what's wrong, and how the government is supposed to be responsible for certain things, how they're supposed to, showing them what their rights are as citizens. Now the people's eyes were opening and they were getting educated and they were going to different countries and coming back and seeing how people have fought so hard for freedom. So then that started in Liberia. Moja, Movement for Justice in Africa. This book that I wrote or that compiled information from the activities of Moja in this book, Moja connected with South Africa with the struggle that was going on in South Africa. So we made our struggle international. We made it intercontinental. So we're telling our people in Liberia, we shouldn't go through this. And we call that our struggle, the struggle for rice, R-I-C-E, and the struggle for R-I-G-H-T, struggle for rice and rice. And then Tubman became a member of Moja newly when the organization started. He wanted to be a member, so he became a member. Tipote, Sawyer, Mason, Hugh Mason, we were many. We worked hard to bring some change in the country. We opened schools in the villages. Even Marcus Garvey School that Joe graduated from, or the way he went to school, it was Moja operation. And we built clinics here and there. In Putu, we had a rice community project. We taught the people how to make farm and how to have community activities. And some people were branding us socialists, but we were not socialists in that true sense of the word. We just wanted to show to the community that as a nation, we should bring our resources together in order to have development. This is what we call susuku. Susu is when people put money together in order to build a society. And ku is when people go clean somebody's farm, but in a corporate way, so that it's not one person cleaning your own farm, but a community comes to do your farm, and then they go to my farm, they go to the next person's farm. So susu and ku, they're putting human resources and financial resources together to build a nation. Few days ago, I published a book, and the title of the book is An Agenda for a Better Liberia. It was written by Joe Batua, and this is another fine book you would like to read. And what Joe is trying to do here is that there needs to be an agenda for our people. There needs to be an agenda for our people. Now, all that struggle that our people struggled through the 50s and 60s, their eyes are open, but the question is, what do they see? Our eyes are open, but what do they see?
So that was the Tubman era, which was greeted by the proliferation of these political activities, including the work.
Along with the political activities, he also made a statement at the United Nations about the Palestinian problem and struggle. And the US didn't like the idea. Remember that he's part of the non-alliance group. He's no longer attached to the United States as tight as Charles D.B. King was, or as tight as Tubman was, or as tight as Bartlett was. So now he sees himself with the new block of people that were in a non-alliance. In his own town, his own country, there's a ferment of liberation. People are getting anxious. They want development. They want quick development. So he comes out with titles like Poverty, Ignorance, and Disease Must Be Eradicated. This is rally time. This is mat to mattress, from mat to mattress, or total involvement for higher heights, or wholesome and functioning society. He comes out with all these slogans. And he makes Chidinwe the director for rice, farming and rice production. And a lot of things are going on in this situation. And then on April 14th, there's a rice riot in Monrovia under his administration. And at this time, Moja was trying to take power, but through not war, not through the gun, but to have Amos Sawyer elected as the mayor of Monrovia. But because the leadership saw that Moja and all the popular groups around the country were in favor of Sawyer, they canceled that election. It was never held. It wasn't until shortly after that there was a military takeover.
There are, there are a lot of things. There are a lot of things that went on before the military took over. But before we get into delve more into all these activities, I want to announce those who are just joining us. This is Focus on Liberia. Our guest is Dr.Nya Kwiawon Taryor, who was a member of Moja. He's our guest tonight. Our topic is still on the history of Liberia, specifically the modern period from 1920 to 1980. So, Dr. Taryor, let's start with Tubman, the death of Tubman. There are a lot of conspiracy surrounding his death. Some said he was assassinated by the Tubman family, or Tubman had something to do with it. What is the true story?
Well, I wouldn't want to give you fake news. I would rather give you information that can be substantiated, that can be verified. And what I know that is verified is that he died outside of the country, and that he was sick and carried to England somewhere in a hospital there where he died. Whether he was poisoned, whether he was shot with a gun, whether he was strangled, I've never heard about that.
Right. There's also another story of when he took power, when he died, there was this commanding general or army president called Cowboy, who accordingly the Americans or whoever wanted to make him head. Have you heard that story?
Who died? When Tubman died?
Tubman died, yeah. They wanted to stage a kind of coup in Monrovia so that to have this military guy who is someone from Lofa County to take over, because accordingly there were rumors that America wanted some indigenous person to take over, and so they wanted to use this cowboy or army personnel, but he declined.
I'm just hearing that for the first time.
Dr. Ambassador David Dr.Nya wrote a book called The Assassination of 3 Liberian Presidents Using Needles, Bullets, and Knives, and he gave that account. But not to dwell too much on that, Tubman time, people look back and say, oh, this was the best time. Some look at him and say, this was time that Liberia had the opportunity to develop, but it didn't. How do you really describe that Tubman era?
Oh, Tubman era was actually a great era. When I say a great era, it was, that's the time of the 40s, the 50s, and 60s. First of all, his emphasis was on unifying the country, as I indicated. And he expanded infrastructural development from where he had taken over from Barclay and started roads going out into the interior. And those roads that were started, they may not have been paved. He built it as far as Total Town, where his farm was, paved. But he was interested in building roads. And then, like I said, education that was overwhelmingly in the hands of missions, Christian missions all over the country, began to merge now as public educations here and there. So under the auspices or under the guardianship of Tubman, there were a lot of developments taking place. Some of the developments that had already started, he helped to spearhead them. He also helped to keep them alive, to keep them moving. Missionaries were not coming in, but other things were happening. There was an economic boom in Liberia. At some point, Liberia was the fastest growing economy in the world. At his death, Liberia had the largest mercantile fleet in the world. A lot of ships were carrying Liberian flag all over. And those ships were also paying duty to Liberian people, to the Liberian government. And not only that, Not only that, excuse me. Not only that, but the economy of Liberia was expanding. He hosted the world largest rubber, Liberia has, during his time, the largest rubber plantation latex factory in the world. And Liberia was the main exporter of iron ore, and it ranked 3 on the world list of iron ore exporters in the world.
But what does that mean for Liberia? What did it benefit Liberia? Oh, the statistic is very good, but what did we get?
Well, to be sincere with you, is what the amount of money was not actually distributed evenly among the ethnic groups or among the different counties and different provinces at the time. In fact, he eliminated provinces and kept only counties. So it was not distributed evenly. For example, people in Nimba County complain, well, the iron ore is here in our place and we produce the greatest iron ore in the world, but yet what we get from it is not sufficient to compensate the effort that at least our place produces. So what I'm saying is that the distribution of our wealth has not yet come to the point where our wealth is equally distributed. However, I think Tubman's time, he did the best he could. The economic development and education of more and more people in Liberia was also his fear. Let me repeat that. Tubman expressed it over and over. He said, this is good to have Liberians educated. It's nice to have them educated, but once we get this education on the way and a lot of people are educated, we will begin to have some problems.
Mm.
He said it not once, not twice or thrice. He said it a lot of times. And we saw what happened after he died, and there was no real tight grips. Tubman was trying to please the old guards. Tubman was trying to please the intellectuals. Tubman was trying to please the indigenous people because he found alliance with them. He could even speak Pele. He saw himself at one with them. He became a part of the poorer society. He was caught between a high rock and the high place, the rock and a high place.
What does that mean?
Meaning that he found himself trying to be everything to everybody. That was one of his downfalls.
Okay. So who actually killed Tubman then?
Oh, killing Tubman. Well, there's a controversy or controversy about his killing. Some people claim that Doe never killed him, but Kwiawon and a group of people went up and killed Tubman. And at that time, they claimed that Doe was hiding behind the flower leaves somewhere around the mansion. Whatever that may be, some of us will never know. Some of us will never know. But all I know is that Doe took over because of all the non-commissioned officers. He had the highest rank after Master Sergeant. So they decided, well, since you are Master Sergeant, you will take over the government. He didn't even know the function of government. He didn't even know what, when he was asked, he said, Ashman, they say, how are you going to develop this country? He said, Ashman, my Minister of Economics, or Ashman, Minister of this, Ashman. He didn't know what to do. And he was a young man. He took over the government knowing very little, knowing very little in terms of what to do at that point. And other people came in to help to solidify what had taken place. And of course, eventually, when he was groomed and he saw himself like he was the master of what needs to be done, then he started purging the government of all those, the progressives that he has surrounded himself with.
Okay.
Very unfortunate.
Yes. All right. Liberia during this time, most of Africa was under colonial rule.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What was Liberia's role in fighting for the independence of Africa?
Okay, several things happened. First of all, Liberia, we claim that Liberia had never been under any country. But how do you look for independence when you have not been in a colony of a country? Liberia was not colonized like Ghana was, or like the Ivory Coast was, or like Sierra Leone was. The American Liberians came into Liberia. When they came into Liberia, what happened was that they came, most of them came under the auspices of the American Colonization Society.
Okay.
The American Colonization Society. Listen to the name now, Colonization Society.
Yeah.
Its purpose was to colonize, so it brought these people to Liberia. And from whom did it get in 1847, from whom did it get its independence? From the society, from that society. It came under the auspices of that. So in the first place, people who claim that Liberia had never been colonized, let them think again. Because you can't get independence unless somebody been over you at some point. Okay, now, the question was the role that Liberia played in all this proliferation of independent states. Some of them were flag independents in these countries, especially South Africa. The organization we have, Moja, we took the people's struggle in South Africa to be our struggle. Meaning we were going through the same experience. We had Steve Biko's movie. We showed our people. We had Mandela situation. We showed our people. And what was happening in South Africa, we personified our own situation in that situation. So when we went to the different towns and villages and had all these meetings, when we talked to them about South Africa, they saw similarity in what was happening in Liberia and what was happening in South Africa. So they could identify with South Africa. And we started sending clothing, we started sending financial support, we started sending other things that people in that war zone needed.
Okay.
We contributed in many ways, and we supported their struggle where certain products were banned, certain institutions were banned. Some people in Africa, especially progressive elements, joined in the struggle to refrain from purchasing, boycotted some of the products from those countries that supported South Africa. The Balta regime. Mm-hmm.
Then let's talk about OAU and other organizations.
Yes, the Organization of African Unity was started in my own county, in Nimba County, and represented were Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Sekou Touré of Guinea. I think Mali was represented, and President William V.S. Tubman was represented. The purpose of the Organization of African Unity was to bring all of Africa under one umbrella, like you have the United States, so that we can reallocate our resources and be able to utilize the wealth and riches of Africa. But unfortunately, there were outsiders who did not want that organization to exist. And they felt that Kwame Nkrumah was going to dominate it, and Kwame Nkrumah wanted to be president, and Kwame Nkrumah, but his emphasis was basically on making Africa a unified continent. Like the United States is a unified continent where you have federal government, and then the other states are under the directorship of the federal government. That's the point they wanted to make. But then eventually they were going to divide Africa into different zones.
Right. But the politics there was Tubman, our president of Liberia, was influenced by those who did not want the United States of Africa.
Yeah. Tubman was a statesman. Like I told you, he was really close with the United States. If there was any nation in the world he identified with, it was the United States. And the United States played a significant role in Liberia, and Liberia also played a significant role in supporting America. For example, the iron ore Bethlehem Steel Corporation is in Liberia, or was in Liberia, and iron ore sent to Bethlehem Steel in Pennsylvania. And not only that, the rubber that was produced there in Liberia was sent to Akron, Ohio. And that's a connection there. Then what happened again was that when VOA, the Voice of America, was stationed in Liberia, and America could beam information all over Africa from Monrovia, from VOA. The Omega station was established in Liberia. After Haile Selassie died, when CIA was located in Addis Ababa, it was brought to Liberia, and Liberia became the center for CIA. A lot of things happened. Liberia was in support of America all the way. This is one of the reasons why Taryor didn't find a comfortable relationship with America when he started to look at other institutions in other places for support.
Things were in Liberia also at this time. We are kind of almost out of time, so I just want us to touch on a few things before we draw down the curtains. One of those things was under Tubman said there was his way of suppressing those that were opposed to him. One of those books that were written was The Plot That Failed: Attempted Assassination of President Tubman. Tubman was staging some fake coups, as I learned. Well, what's the story?
Well, to be sincere with you, I grew up under Tubman's regime. And I remember this man, you couldn't even whisper his name. And when he died, we were very much afraid that his spirit was going to haunt you if you did anything. I was a student at Cottington then, and this man would send the CID, they call it CID, and plant them in the classrooms and listen to the teachers. And if the teachers spoke about the Liberian government in any derogatory fashion, if they were foreign teachers, they were deported. They were considered persona non grata. They were not accepted in the country anymore. A couple of professors were sent home because in dealing with the Liberian situation, they were harsh. And people like Albert Port, Twanwele, Robert Kluver, Gus Devener, These were people who were very critical of the administration, and they wrote in their books or did everything they could to let the Liberian people know that Tubman was very repressive. And everybody knew, but there was a code of silence. People lived in a culture of silence. They didn't say much. He was extremely repressive. So during that particular coup you're talking about, Coleman was involved. Coleman was aspiring either for the presidency, and Tubman used to plan some frivolous, when I say frivolous attack on himself and claim that people have tried to kill him. In fact, Fambule and few others who were either county superintendents or ambassador here and there were considered to be planning coup against him or assassinate him. And he will humiliate those people. Even though I believe that Tubman brought a lot of development to Liberia and under his regime, a lot of things happened that gave momentum to growth and development in Liberia. In the meantime, he was a benevolent dictator. He was a dictator.
Yeah.
Every time he would encourage people to come and parade and say, let him succeed himself, let the president succeed himself. Either 7 or 8 times he succeeded himself.
But what did the Constitution say? Was there a term limit?
No, he derailed that.
Let's talk about the history of ritualistic killing in Liberia. I saw a picture where there were people hanged in chains in, I think it was Tapeta, and they called them leper men.
Yeah.
And also in 1979, there was people were killed because of ritualistic killing.
Yeah, in the 20s and 30s, there were a lot of ritualistic killings. They believed that certain parts of the human body would be used for medicine or for promotion on the job or for love affairs, to be liked by some, call it, in the Kwela people call it Nya Dono, me alone. You take me alone. You love me alone. Or I'm the only person who's going to be the leader here. So they took different parts of people's body, private parts, for medicine. And that wasn't too good. That wasn't too good. That wasn't too good. But Tubman was not, he was not anxious to execute people. He was not anxious to execute people.
But some of these things, government had their hand in it too, right? The story we heard was people in power, they were paying people to get these human parts.
Yeah, but some of them were getting it to get position in government. Now, I hate to be, but there was, it may have been a rumor or it may have been true, but even Alan Yense was involved in this thing. His name was, I read some of his books, his history book. Alan Jerome Yense, he wrote a book on Liberian history many years ago when I was a student. But then I discovered that there were a lot of situations like that in which his name was involved. Whether it was verified, it was substantiated, we never got the details. We never got the details. The execution, for example, that took place of Obi was not on Tubman. It was on a Talbot.
Right. Talk to me about that, Justin Obi, because those were some of the major and scary events in Liberia.
Obi was my biology teacher at Cottington. He was my biology teacher at Cottington. His name was Dr. Justin Obi. I think at the time of his death, he was 65. He was a Nigerian.
Okay.
He taught at Cottonton, yeah. And he killed Bishop Dallard Brown. Bishop Brown was the Episcopal bishop who was also in charge of Cottonton. I understand that because Obi was fired from the job at Cottonton, he went to America and got whatever he wanted, and he came to Liberia and he killed Bishop Brown and Claude Nada, who was the assistant to the bishop. When Obi was killed, he was convicted on March. It was in March in 1971,
Yeah.
and he sentenced to death for double murder, killing those two people, and he was hanged on Friday, November 19, 1971. No motive was given as far as him. And the statement he made was, "I have no malice, nor do I hate anyone." He said, "I go to my Creator with joy." That's his last statement he made.
Let's, before we close down, let's talk about the involvement of diaspora Liberians in Liberian politics. I know you wrote a book about the activities of UNICO.
Yes.
You know, one of those diaspora groups. But let's talk more about their participation in the political activities in Liberia.
Okay, I have a chapter in that book. I just had a book a few minutes ago. I have a chapter in that book, and a chapter in that, this is the book itself. They call it Liberia Facing Mount Nimba. Liberia Facing Mount Nimba. I wrote it in 1991. And there is a chapter here, and this chapter deals with the contribution of Liberian organizations. Some people tell us that Liberians, why are you congregating and calling yourself Bone County Association, or Nimba County Association, or Basel Association, or Crown Association, all these kind of things? It should not be accepted. In fact, the languages in Liberia should not be allowed to grow, because if you allow languages to grow in Liberia, you bring about sectionalism, you bring about tribalism, you bring about division in the country. So the only language we should speak should be English. But those are faulty assumptions, very faulty assumptions. Those organizations are necessary. They are extremely necessary, because if Liberians here in this country or in Europe and other parts were not sending money to relatives and friends and sending money for development of their towns and villages, Liberia will be at another war again, because the government is not capable of providing enough money for all those people. Liberians in America send thousands and thousands of dollars every day to relatives or through organization. They are going to build a bridge in their town. They are building a library in this village, or they are building a clinic in that section. They are doing this. This is what I kept Liberia up. So to claim that, oh, these organizations are not worth it, we need to close them down, oh, we bring in tribalism. In fact, when you know yourself better, then you'll be able to know other people. When you know your own language, you know your tradition, you know yourself, then you will be able to know others. You'll be able to respect others, because you know who you are, what you are, where you came from. Very important.
And then on the during that time, during the modern era, especially during the time of Tubman, activities of diaspora Liberians led to some form of agitation in the country. What do you say to that?
They led to some kind of what?
Agitation.
Oh, okay. For example, the PAR group, Progressive Alliance, under the auspices of Marcus Matthew. There were proliferation of organizations. There was a Susuku group, there was a Moja group, there was a PA group, and there were some other subgroups. It's very unfortunate that these groups never wrote anything of substance to be left behind as a legacy of how those organizations operated, what their goals were, what their objectives were, what their mission were, what they contributed and what they didn't contribute, and what plans they had for the nation. But the people in Moja, we were able to compile this book, Justice, Justice, A Cry of My People. And this book details our activities in Moja, what we did in Liberia. But it was not only Moja in Liberia, but all other groups that were established, progressive groups. Their purpose, their main aim was to make our people conscious of their rights as citizens of the country, and to also explain the responsibility of the government to them as citizens. So therefore, some feathers may have been ruffled here and there because these organizations were going and telling stories and dealing with issues that the government did not appreciate or didn't want the people to know. So that brought a lot of problems. When the Gabriel Matthew Power Group started, they started as an organization, but eventually they developed into a political party. Whereas in the past, we had only one party, the True We Party. Before the True We Party, of course, there was Reformation Party, there was the People's Party, there was True We Party, but eventually after 1944, I think we had only one party. That one party, it was during the period that we are talking about that we developed the consciousness in our people and made them aware that, you know, we are democratic people. We need to be able to articulate our own destiny. We need to be able to articulate our own national priorities and set our own agenda as a people. We need to get people with different views. We need to organize different parties. It is there that there was a proliferation of parties all over the place. And too many parties, that's not good either.
All right.
We are having difficulties with that too.
Yeah. All right, Dr. Taryor, we almost out of time, so we just want to just wrap it up. Give us your final thoughts, and we'll be drawing down the curtains.
Okay, first of all, let me just introduce a few things in terms of books.
Okay.
There's a lady in Liberia that her name is Cecilia Morris. She's putting together a book here, and this book is the history and practice of nursing in Liberia. This is the first of its kind that such a book had been written. We are printing the books right now. You can get it from Cecilia Harris. Morris, the books will be out in March. We are printing the books now. Very fine book. This book details the health problems in Liberia, how the nursing program has started in Liberia, how initially America had to send in nurses, and now we are developing our own nurses and midwives, and what had been happening, and the different institutions that are opening for nurses. This is a fine book. It deals with a health problem. And next to that is the development of healthcare system in Liberia by another doctor. His name is Dr. Benson Barr, and I will encourage you. Dr. Barr is a professor of medicine and healthcare.
Dr. Taryor, show you on the other side because there's a reflection from the light.
Oh, okay.
All right. Yeah, that's good.
Okay, okay. Listen to that. Okay, and this is it.
Okay.
And this book was written by Dr. Harris' wife, and it's about how Ganda Mission was established. Very, very fine book. I would recommend it to everybody. In this book, it tells us how roads were built in the interior. Firestone brought some buggies and cars early, and the first car that they used in the interior, people dismantled them and carried them on their head to Ganta in order to use it there at the school there, and at the church, and at the hospital. And Dunbar, George Dunbar, he was the district superintendent, no, district superintendent. He was the commissioner in the Seneca area during that time in Nimba County or Central Province. He, along with George Wehale, built a road from Totota to Ganta. Fine account of how missionaries have struggled to help our country. And the final book I want to reintroduce again is Nya's book, Nya Bowman's book. If you want to know anything about Liberia's history, Nya Bowman's book, I will recommend it highly. I recommend it highly. Some of the discussions we have had today, I've used it as a source. So Nya, thank you very much for your contribution to our country. Fine book.
All right. So Dr. Taryor, I want to thank you so much for your time and your knowledge tonight. We will still want to have you back someday. Next week, we're going to continue with our history series. We're going to cover the period from 1980 to present, as the post-coup Liberia. Professor Dr. Sam Govo is going to be back to talk to us about that period. Eventually, we're going to have this history series as an annual event. We are working on that, and so you should look forward to that very soon. Once again, I want to thank you for all those who are watching us by way of television, YouTube, or Facebook. We appreciate your time. Liberia is the only country we have, and if we don't know the history of the country, it means we don't know ourselves. We can appreciate ourselves. We can find the value, as we always quoted Michael Garvey, that if you don't know your history, I mean, that's a very sad situation. So please join us next Sunday as we talk about the history of Liberia, specifically from the period 1980 to present. Again, on behalf of my co-host, Danielle Knuckles, and my guest relations manager, Stephanie Setro, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. From me to you, we want to say thank you again, Dr. Taryor, and thank all of you who are here with us. Liberian history, we got to tell it, man. Good night, and God bless you.